This is the early evening of the 26th. It just happened again. I was doing part 2 of Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, flips. Part 2. Listened to the whole thing for like 15 and a half minutes. Went away. I'm going to do it again because it's important. Hopefully, it won't crash this time. Sit back and have a listen.
And Meadows can testify to Trump's intent. To the fact that Trump knew he lost, but tried to prevent certification anyway, there are potentially charges related to the incitement of the January 6th riot, to Trump's role in gathering the mob, in directing them to the Capitol, in failing to stop the violence once it started. Meadows was with Trump during January 6th, knows what Trump was doing, what he was watching, what he said, whether he made any efforts to stop the violence or whether he was pleased it was happening. That testimony could support charges related to the riot itself. And then there are state-level charges. Georgia is already pursuing a case related to Trump's efforts to overturn results in that state. And Meadows' testimony about the broader conspiracy provides context for those state charges, shows they weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a coordinated national effort directed by Trump. The impact on Trump's co-conspirators is significant, because Meadows isn't just providing evidence against Trump, he's providing evidence against everyone involved in these schemes. Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Jeffrey Clark, all the lawyers and advisors who helped Trump try to overturn the election. Meadows can testify about their roles, about meetings they attended, about actions they took, and his testimony combined with the documents he's providing could result in charges against dozens of people. This is potentially the biggest political conspiracy case in American history, and Meadows is the star witness who ties it all together. The political implications are massive. Republicans are going to have to decide how to respond. Do they continue defending Trump even as his own chief of staff testifies he committed crimes? Do they claim Meadows is lying even though he has documents to prove what he's saying, or do they finally distance themselves, start acknowledging that Trump did try to overturn the election and that it was illegal? That's a difficult calculation because Trump still controls a large portion of the Republican base, and those voters don't want to hear that their guy committed crimes. They want Republicans to defend Trump and attack prosecutors, but the evidence is becoming overwhelming, and at some point, even Trump's defenders are going to struggle to maintain the narrative that this is all a witch hunt. Democrats are going to use Meadows' testimony aggressively in campaigns, in congressional hearings, and public statements. They're going to say, look, Trump's own chief of staff confirms he tried to steal the election, confirms he knew he lost and tried to overturn it anyway. This isn't partisan speculation. This is testimony from someone who was there, who saw it all, who has documents to prove it. That's a powerful political argument, and it's going to be hard for Trump and his allies to counter. Because Meadows was one of them, was part of the inner circle, and now he's confirming everything Trump's critics have been saying for years. The coming months are going to be crucial. Meadows' cooperation is still somewhat recent. Prosecutors are still using his testimony to build cases. Grand juries are still hearing evidence. Indictments are still being finalized. But the trajectory is clear. Trump is going to face serious federal charges related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And those charges are going to be backed by testimony from his own chief of staff, by documents from the White House, by evidence that proves Trump knew what he was doing was illegal and did it anyway. That's the kind of case that results in convictions. That puts people in prison. And everyone on Capitol Hill understands that. That's why they're erupting. That's why this is being treated as such a watershed moment. Because Mark Meadows just handed prosecutors everything they need to hold Trump accountable for attempting to steal an election. And there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. Okay, so let's break this down into the key points because there's so much here and we need to focus on what really matters. Point number one, Mark Meadows flipping is the single biggest development in the prosecution of Trump's post-election conduct. This isn't some peripheral figure. This isn't someone who had limited access or secondhand knowledge. This is Trump's chief of staff, the person who was with him constantly, who was in every meeting, who knew about every plan. And now he's cooperating fully with prosecutors. That changes everything because insider testimony is incredibly powerful. When someone from the inner circle confirms the prosecution's theory of the case, when they provide firsthand accounts of criminal conduct, it becomes very difficult for the defense to create reasonable doubt. Meadows can testify about what Trump said and did, about Trump's intent, about whether Trump knew his actions were illegal. And that testimony coming from someone who was so close to Trump is devastatingly effective for prosecutors. The reason Meadows' cooperation is so significant is that it solves one of the biggest challenges in prosecuting Trump, which is proving intent. For most of these charges, prosecutors need to show Trump knew what he was doing was wrong and did it anyway. That's hard to prove with just external evidence. You can show what Trump did, but showing what he was thinking, what he knew, that requires insider testimony, and that's exactly what Meadows provides. He can testify that Trump was told by advisors there was no election fraud, can describe Trump's reactions to being told that, can show that Trump understood he lost but pursued illegal strategies anyway. That's proof of criminal intent. And without that proof, Trump's defense would be that he genuinely believed the election was stolen, that he was acting on honest belief rather than criminal intent. But Meadows destroys that defense, shows Trump knew better but acted criminally anyway.
Watch what magnesium does to your body.
Ad popped up.
Point number 2. The documentary evidence Meadows is providing makes his testimony nearly unassailable. One of the risks with cooperating witnesses is that defense attorneys can attack their credibility, can suggest they're lying to get a better deal for themselves, can point out they have motivation to say whatever prosecutors want to hear. And to some extent, that attack will work with Meadows. Trump's lawyers will definitely argue that Meadows is making things up to avoid prosecution. But here's the problem for that defense strategy. Meadows isn't just testifying, he's providing documents. White House memos, meeting notes, text messages, email chains. All of this documentary evidence corroborates what he's saying, shows he's not making things up, shows the conspiracy really happened the way he describes. And you can't attack the credibility of documents. They are what they are. They say what they say. And if they show Trump discussing fake electors and pressuring Pence, that's proof, not speculation, not one person's word against another's actual proof. The combination of insider testimony plus documentary evidence is prosecutors' dream. It's the kind of case that's almost impossible to defend against because the documents show what happened. And Meadows can explain what the documents mean, can provide context, can describe the meetings where these documents were created, can connect the dots for jurors. That's why legal experts are calling this a game changer, because Meadows' cooperation doesn't just add one more witness. It transforms the entire case from something that relied on external evidence and inference into something that has direct insider proof of criminal conduct. That's the difference between a difficult case and an easy one, between something Trump might beat and something that's almost certain to result in conviction. Point number 3, the scope of potential charges is enormous and extends beyond just Trump. When prosecutors have evidence of a conspiracy as extensive as what Meadows is describing, they can charge everyone who participated, and we're talking about dozens of people potentially. All the lawyers who worked on the fake elector scheme, all the officials who participated in creating fake elector slates, all the people who coordinated pressure campaigns against state officials, everyone who was in meetings planning these schemes, everyone who took actions to execute them, all of them are now at risk of prosecution, and many of them are going to face a choice. Do they cooperate like Meadows and provide evidence against others, or do they fight the charges and risk serious prison time? That dynamic, where prosecutors flip lower-level conspirators to build cases against higher-level ones, that's how you prosecute complex conspiracies. You start with people who have the most exposure. You offer them deals to cooperate. They provide evidence against their co-conspirators. And gradually you work your way up the chain until you've got solid cases against everyone involved. Meadows cooperating is the biggest domino, but he won't be the last. Other people who were involved in these schemes are going to see that Meadows flipped, are going to see what kind of evidence he's providing, and they're going to make the same calculation. Better to cooperate and minimize my own sentence than to protect Trump and go to prison for years. So we're probably going to see more cooperators, more insiders providing testimony, more documents being turned over, and each one makes the case stronger, makes conviction more certain, makes it harder for anyone to defend their actions. The political damage this does to Trump is substantial even before any trials happen. The court of public opinion matters, and Meadows confirming that Trump tried to overturn the election, that Trump knew he lost but tried to steal it anyway, That's damning. It removes any fig leaf of legitimacy from Trump's post-election conduct. Removes the ability to claim he was just pursuing legitimate legal challenges, shows he was engaged in a criminal conspiracy. And that's going to affect how people view Trump, how they think about his claims that he's being persecuted, how they evaluate his fitness for office. Some people, Trump's hardcore base, won't be swayed. They'll claim Meadows is lying or was coerced. But for everyone else, for independents and moderate Republicans, this is evidence that's hard to ignore. Trump's own chief of staff saying he committed crimes. That's powerful. That's the kind of thing that changes minds. Republicans in Congress are in an impossible position now. They've been defending Trump for years, claiming the investigations are partisan witch hunts, claiming there's no evidence of wrongdoing. But Meadows' cooperation undermines all of that, because Republicans can't claim this is a partisan attack when Trump's own Republican chief of staff is confirming the charges. Can't claim there's no evidence when someone from the inner circle is providing detailed testimony backed by documents. So what do? Some will continue defending Trump no matter what, will attack Meadows as a traitor, will claim the documents are fake or taken out of context, will maintain the persecution narrative no matter how absurd it becomes. But others are going to start distancing themselves, are going to stop defending Trump's conduct, even if they don't explicitly condemn it, are going to focus on other issues and try to avoid discussing Trump's legal problems. That fracturing of Republican support matters because it isolates Trump, makes him more politically vulnerable, makes it easier for prosecutors to move forward without facing overwhelming political blowback. The timeline for charges and trials is going to accelerate now. Meadows' cooperation gives prosecutors what they need. They don't have to keep investigating, don't have to keep trying to flip witnesses or gather evidence. They have it. Meadows and his documents provide the core of the case. So prosecutors can move to indictments, can present evidence to grand juries, can secure charges against Trump and his co-conspirators. We're probably looking at federal indictments within weeks or months rather than years. And once charges are filed, trials move forward relatively quickly by legal standards. So we could be looking at Trump on trial for election-related crimes within the next year, facing real prison time if convicted. And based on the evidence Meadows is providing, conviction seems likely. Not certain, nothing is certain in trials, but likely, very likely. The historical significance of this moment cannot be overstated. We're watching a conspiracy to overturn a presidential election being exposed and prosecuted in real time, with insider testimony from the people who participated, with documentary evidence showing what they planned and did. This is going to be studied for generations in law schools, in political science courses, in history classes, as an example of both how democratic norms can be threatened and how legal systems can hold perpetrators accountable. Mark Meadows' decision to cooperate is a pivotal moment in that story. The moment when the conspiracy became undeniable, when the evidence became overwhelming, when accountability became inevitable. And for Trump personally, this is catastrophic. His chief of staff, someone he trusted completely, someone who was supposed to be loyal forever, has turned on him, has provided prosecutors with everything they need to prove Trump committed crimes, has ensured that Trump will face trial and likely conviction. There's no spinning this as a positive, no way to claim victory. This is pure, unmitigated legal disaster for Trump, and he brought it on himself. Because if Trump hadn't tried to overturn the election, if he'd accepted defeat and left office peacefully like every president before him, none of this would be happening. Meadows wouldn't have evidence of crimes because there wouldn't have been any crimes. There wouldn't be prosecutions because there wouldn't be anything to prosecute. But Trump couldn't accept defeat, couldn't let go of power, had to try every illegal scheme he could think of to stay in office. And now his own chief of staff is testifying about all of it, is providing the evidence that's going to send Trump to prison. The final point is this. Capitol Hill erupting over Meadows' revelations shows that even in our polarized political environment, there are still lines that can't be crossed without consequences. Trump tried to overturn an election, tried to steal the presidency, tried to subvert democracy itself. And now he's being held accountable, not just in the court of public opinion, not just in political discourse, but in actual courts, with actual charges, with actual possibility of prison time. That's the system working. That's democracy defending itself. That's the rule of law being enforced, even against the most powerful people. Mark Meadows providing the evidence to make that happen. That's significant. That's historic. That's the moment when Trump's attempt to destroy democratic norms met the reality that some institutions, some people, some evidence can't be ignored or overcome. And whatever happens in the trials, whatever the ultimate outcome, this moment matters. Moment. Capitol Hill erupting over Meadows' testimony, recognizing that the evidence is now undeniable, understanding that accountability is coming. That's the story. That's what makes this so important. And that's why this is going to be remembered as the turning point when Trump's criminal conduct finally caught up with him.
Let's hope this bag of shit ends up in Rikers Island. I'll attach the link. Pass it along, and thanks for listening.